Hello, this is Julie with Food Service Women's Alliance, and I'm here today with Ryan Cigler. Ryan was gracious enough to help us with some of our job workshops. And he did 3 sessions for us within the last month or so on resume tips and LinkedIn pointers. So Ryan, could you please introduce yourself and then we'll get right into it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Julie. I appreciate inviting me to do this. For those that don't know me, my name is Ryan Cigler, and I am a senior partner in an executive search firm called SPEC Incorporated out of Madison, Wisconsin. And we specialize in recruiting sales, marketing, and product development professionals for food and beverage manufacturers, specifically, primarily in the food service space, which is how Julie and I have come to know each other over the years. I've been a partner here it'll be 20 years in September. So we've been doing this for quite some time. And I was absolutely delighted when Julie asked me to be a part of the Food Service Women's Alliance. It's a great organization. A couple of quick points on why I connect with this organization. One, even though I'm a senior partner here, we are a majority female-owned organization. And two, I like to always throw in that I'm a proud girl dad with 2 daughters of my own, both involved in athletics, one going off to college. So I am all about empowering women, and I love the cause. So I'm always happy to help.
Thank you so much. Well, we're so happy to have you as an FWA member and ally. So thank you for that as well. Ryan, look, a lot of people in these workshops ask some great questions, but one consistent thing that I heard over and over again were like, people want to know, like, what are the big mistakes people make on resumes? And I guess on maybe even their LinkedIn too, however you would like to speak about that.
Sure. Well, what I'd like to start with, we were discussing offline about how difficult it is to cram all the resume advice we have into 15 minutes, because resumes are a very personal thing. And if you ask 10 people about resumes, you almost always get 10 different opinions. So we're going to stick to high level things. And to your point, Julie, I'm going to, touch on some do's and don'ts at a very high level that I think are a good base for a resume. And then obviously you want to tweak it from there. The most common mistake I see on a resume, especially for people who are out of practice, who haven't written in a long time, is focusing too much on responsibilities and not enough on tangible and measurable accomplishments. A good rule of thumb is that your resume should never read like a job description. In other words, if you're just listing what you're responsible for, but aren't communicating any tangible and measurable accomplishments, you're only saying what you did. You're not saying whether or not you did it well. And hiring managers are looking for a high achiever. And a very realistic scenario is envision, your resume in a pile of 50, 100 resumes, and a hiring manager having, 5-10 minutes between calls to flip through these resumes and decide which ones they want to give more attention to. What's going to make that hiring manager stop at yours? And it's never going to be something that you're simply responsible for. It's always going to be for a big achievement. So make sure to focus on the achievements are sort of the foundation of the resume. If you're putting this in the analogy of a house, the achievements are the foundation, and then the format of the resume is the house itself. And I think the analogy I used on one of our webinars is, if you see a house that looks pretty from the outside for sale, you go inside and look at it and you see the walls cracked and, gaps between the door frames, and when you're going to turn around and walk out, it's because it didn't have a strong foundation. So the content, the accomplishments are the foundation. Start there, jotting down what your big achievements are, the things you're most proud of, and then worry about the format of the resume second.
I love that. And the emphasis on content as well, because that is and has to speak for you in a room that you are not in. So I love that. That's fantastic. So I know you talked about in one of the workshops that experience by itself is not enough to get you the job. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, I can. So a lot of people have at the top of their resume a little brief description of themselves, or, a summary. It can be morphed into an objective, but I can't tell you how many times we see over 20 years of experience doing this, or over 25 years of experience in this industry as an accomplishment. A lot of people want to do it. Now, age discrimination is one of those things that no one will ever acknowledge that they do, but let's be honest, it exists. So for one thing, you want to be careful about advertising number of years for that reason. But more importantly, a hiring manager said to me very early in my career, and I thought this was an excellent point. He saw a resume that said over 25 years of experience as a national account salesperson, we'll say. His comment was, well, if you repeated your first year 24 times, then what good does 25 years of experience do me? And I thought it was an excellent point. So yes, a lot of people like to highlight the amount of time they've been doing it, but there have been people who've been working in our industry for 30, 35, 40 years that haven't progressed beyond, say, a basic management level. And there are people who have been in the industry for 10 years who have been promoted every year and a half and are on track to be a VP. So you're right. Number of years of experience is not an accomplishment.
Yeah. I know a lot of people make that mistake thinking, hey, I've got this big well of this track record of experience, but the track record of success is what's really important, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think the other thing is you talked a little bit about like what the gaze pattern is. We always talk about gaze patterns in relation to menus and menu engineering, but guess what, folks? There's a gaze pattern for a resume. So how important is that most recent job? How important are all those bullets that people lament over at the top of the resume? How important are those things?
It's an excellent question. And I always go back to much earlier in my career, I read a study. It was in Psychology Today, actually, about how employers or hiring managers read a resume. And this kind of goes back to when you talk about the most common mistakes, tying in what I said earlier about content versus design. I see a lot of people put too much effort in the format, too much effort into the design and not enough effort on the content. And this is a good supporting evidence that that is the case. So according to this study, the way hiring managers typically read a resume is they'll start by looking at your name, your contact information, and location. The next thing they look at is they skim down to what your most recent job is, and they read that first. And then, and only then, if they like what they see, they'll go back and read the rest. So if you're putting a ton of effort into content that's in between your name and the first work experience, you just have to keep in the back of your mind that there's a very, very high likelihood that that's all going to get skipped over right away anyway. They're going to go right to the first job. And then if they see something with your most recent experience that they can sink their teeth into or catches their attention, then and only then will they go back and read the rest of it. So again, goes back to support, focus on the content first, format second.
Okay, so let's talk about someone who may be out of work right now. So number one, how do you handle that on the resume? And number two, how do you feel about when you're looking for candidates in the industry? How do you feel about that like open to work thing that they have on LinkedIn?
It's an unfortunate reality that it can be held against a person if they're out of work. I'm, in my years doing this, I see plenty of very talented and very hardworking people end up out of work for reasons that are completely outside of their control. But the reality is, there are people that do have a bias against people who aren't currently working. There are a few ways to look at this. The first thing I say when it comes to people who are currently unemployed or had a short move earlier in their career that they want to omit from their resume. Let's say, I was only there for 7 months. I don't want to put it on the resume. The important thing that you need to keep in mind is let's play this interview process out to the very end. They want to make you an offer. They're going to go do a background check. They're going to find out. They're going to find out about that short move, and they're going to find out exactly when your last work experience ended. So you don't want to come across as if you're trying to hide something or as if you have something to hide. Because a very common thing aside from people who are out of work is they'll just leave 2021 to present when they actually lost their job in August of 2023. And if an employer finds that out on their own through a background check, then all of a sudden you're wandering into where you're misrepresenting yourself. And that's a bigger problem than being out of work. So I'd say honesty is the best policy, first of all. Some people actually include the reason for their why they're out of work on the resume. Like they'll add a little sentence saying, due to a corporate restructure, 5% of the workforce affected. So if it's a situation like that, you can sort of nip it in the bud and put it on the resume. There are ways you can structure your resume. I've had people, there's a gentleman I'm working with right now, as a matter of fact, worked for the same company for 15 years, has had 2 jobs since due to COVID, started by focusing on the 15-year job, but was honest about the dates at the top, then went to additional work experience and listed the jobs, even the short stints underneath, but he got the employer to focus on the most important piece of experience first. Goes back to the study the gaze pattern, right? He went back, he's like, okay, 15 years with this company, good track record, but wait a minute, he has this gap. Then he went down and found out, but he gave him the benefit of the doubt because he was able to explain it. We had a global pandemic, might have heard of it. So I think there are different ways to address it. When it comes to the open to work sign on LinkedIn, I don't see any harm in that whatsoever, but I tell people not to count on that to get to, that's not a pass to put less effort into networking on LinkedIn or reach out to fewer people. It's nice to know. I do notice when I'm doing a LinkedIn search, but the content of the profile still has to be good if I'm going to stop and reach out to you.
So what you were just saying about doing a LinkedIn search made me think about another topic we talked about in the workshops, which was this idea of sort of custom tailoring your resume to the specific job you're applying for, and maybe even pulling some of those out. I know one of the things you said was like your resume should not be a carbon copy of your LinkedIn, and your LinkedIn should not be a carbon copy of your resume. The two things together should really tell the story. But talk to us just a little bit about like how important is it to tailor that resume to each job you apply for?
I'd say it's critically important because hiring managers look for that. When you talk about what stands out on a resume, and again, after the initial gaze pattern, all right, you have my attention, I'm engaged, I want to read your resume. Every resume is different, but it's important to read over the job description, and you'll know different organizations and different positions and different functions use different buzzwords, different companies do. And trust me, hiring managers almost always pick up on if you're using the buzzwords or using the buzzwords from the job description in your resume. I also come across people who are, for example, a sales marketing hybrid, or someone who's done national accounts and distribution and held high level positions in both. Well, if someone's looking for someone to run sales versus marketing or chain accounts versus distribution, they're looking for very different things. So if you have a one size fits all resume where you have a little bit about distribution and a little bit about national accounts, okay, that's good, but I want to know more about what I specifically want. So your resume it's a interchangeable, pliable document. You want it to be able to edit it for each individual. And some people, it's funny, I think some people go through a lot of unnecessary work and they'll say, I have 5 different versions of my resume.
Oh.
I'll say, that's great, but you're still going to have to customize one of those when I come to you with an opportunity. So save yourself the time. Don't think you have to do 5 different versions of your resume. Just make sure your resume is easy to edit and pivot for each specific opportunity, because really, even if you have 5, 10, 15, I don't care how many versions of your resume you've done, you're still going to have to customize it to the opportunity you're applying for based on that specific job description.
Outstanding. Well, listen, we're going to wrap up here in the next, 15 seconds or so, but I just wanted to say thank you for your willingness. I know what an incredibly busy individual you are. Thank you for lending your expertise to our FWA audience. And any last thoughts you want to throw out there?
It's always a pleasure to help. You have a great organization, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Julie.
You bet.